She called him safe, and what he heard was undesirable. That's this week on Men in the Wild, where we find real stories of men in relationships on the internet, and we break down what's going on underneath the surface to take a look at what are the messages that we've learned about what it means to be a man, and how are those lessons impacting our lives today. This week's story is a doozy. A guy writes into Reddit and he says, "Am I the asshole for leaving a couple's trip in the middle of the night and ruining the vibe?" He writes, "Last weekend was my birthday. Me and my girlfriend of 2 years had plans to get dinner. She came to pick me up from work and her car was packed and my best friend and his wife were in the back seat. To my surprise, she had planned a whole weekend away to my favorite lake, rented a sick house on the water, and invited all of our friends. Basically, the first night there, they're having a bunch of fun. People are drinking. They started playing a couples question game. And he says, it was fun. Tell a question of what originally attracted you to your significant other. He says, she blurted out, he was safe and I knew he wouldn't cheat or leave me. Basically, this guy proceeds to have a pretty famous meltdown of just being inconsolably upset. Everybody was watching, right? Because he's the birthday boy. And so he just said, hey, you know what? Let's talk about it later. And then in the middle of the night at 5 a.m, this guy leaves the cabin with all of his best friends and his girlfriend and goes back into town. Everybody's blowing up his phone. He says he turns it off and decides to go play golf. Finally comes back home and his girlfriend is there and she's livid with him. She had spent all of this money just to do something special for him. And she basically felt like, hey, you're a huge asshole, not because your feelings got hurt, but because you wouldn't talk about it at all. And then you basically stormed out and left me here. Now, here's what comes up for me when I read this story. What must be going on in our stereotypical definitions of masculinity and manhood in our society, where if somebody says that you're safe, you feel like that's the most disrespectful thing that they can say to you. And it brings us back to this recurrent problem, right? That if I base my sense of self and my identity on this very fragile framework, that I am going to constantly be required to maintain it, and any little thing that is a part of life is going to jeopardize my entire sense of self. Now, what's clear to me in this story is this guy obviously has some major grief and wounding and shame just about his own self-concept, right? But maybe I've never gone to therapy. I've never worked with a coach. I've never participated in a men's group. I've never done any work on that issue. And now my girlfriend, who by the way has a history of trauma and abuse from men, puts everything into this weekend for me. And because she says a word that makes me think about how afraid I am that I'm not really desirable, now I'm going to ruin everybody's time because of all of the work with myself that I have refused to do. And so here's the truth. How many of us men need to do some work on our own feelings of inadequacy, of shame, and of fear, rather than trying to control, blast, and blame the women in our life because they're not constantly propping up our self-image? What do you think? Was he justifiable to blow up the birthday party, or does this guy need to do some real work? Let me know in the comments, and stick around because tomorrow we're going to break down what we can do as men to have a much more stable and secure sense of self that will allow us to have authenticity and connection in our relationships. As always, hit follow for more.